So again, Shabbat Shalom, guys. Um, I'm I've, I've been working towards this throughout the entire book of Matthew, and then I had a lot of things that happened over the course of the last week or so. I guess that really almost got me steered in other directions, and sometimes. Wise counsel comes from the most unexpected places. Um, and then sometimes the word shows up to confirm everything. And let me look here. I just want to see if in my head if I'm right about what it is. I think a lot of time uh, a lot of times we feel like we have to defend ourselves. A lot of times we feel like somebody says something and we have to defend ourselves or our position or our beliefs. And Exodus 14:14. Just one verse. I don't usually do just one verse things, but this is how he spoke to me this time. And Exodus 14:14 says, Yahweh shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. So we're going to go with where we've been working this whole time. We're going to go to Matthew 27. And I got a few things to share with you that I personally had never really thought through, and that really spoke to me in a much larger and more magnificent way. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading Matthew chapter 27, starting at verse 1. When the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Yeshua to put him to death. And when they'd bound him, now I want to pause for just a second because I want to remind you guys where we left off. They had already taken him in. They'd already accused him of, they questioned him. He refused to answer. And then he said, after this, you're going to see the Son of Man seated on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes, and they started spitting in his face, beating him, saying, prophesy who hit you. So he's already been arrested. He's already been beaten. Peter has already denied him. And now we are at morning after that night. When morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Yeshua to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him unto Pontius Pilate, governor. His name was actually Pilate. That was his name. Pontius was the position that he held. A position held by someone who was under, say, Caesar, or I'm sure his direct report. He wasn't the only person under Caesar, but he was the governor over that area. So he was sent there by Rome to guard and to rule in Caesar's stead over Judea. And so then Judas, which betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. Stop right there. Okay, Judas, who betrayed him. You've heard that your entire life, right? Judas Iscariot was the one who betrayed him, right? He was the one who betrayed him. Thing is, you have to bear in mind, remember, Jesus is not Jesus because no names ended with S, and they didn't begin with a J. Okay, so it was Yeshua was his name. And if you look at Judas, well, what was Judas's name? Judas's name was Yehuda, which is where we get the Hebrew word Judah, like the tribe of Judah, the only remaining tribe in all of the nation of Israel. Because you had Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, which were actually brought into one tribe together. So you had the tribe of Judah. That was the only remaining tribe. All the others had already forsook him. All the others were already cast out and spread abroad across the corners of the earth. The one last remnant of Israel was Judah. Judah means praise. Judah, David was of the tribe of Judah. Yeshua was born of the tribe of Judah. And who was it that came and betrayed him with a kiss? But the disciple, Judah. He brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, what's that to us? You see to that. That's literally what they said. They were like, what's it to me? This was your decision. You came to us. It literally says that he came to them. They were afraid to go try to get one of them. He was the one that showed up and came to them. And he was the one that said, what will you give me? They offered him blood money. That 30 pieces of silver was what Brian would pay to me if I had a servant and Brian had an ox that accidentally killed my servant. Brian would pay me 30 pieces of silver. That was to offset my inconvenience. And that was what he was deemed to be worthy. They said, what's that to us? You go see to that. And he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple, and he departed, and he went and he hanged himself. And the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it's not lawful for us to put them into the treasury, because it is blood money, because it's the price of blood. And they took counsel, so they talked about it together, and they bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. To this day, a potter's field is a term that's used for a place where unknown bodies are buried. If that's a term that is used across the world. And they bought the potter's field. Now, I want to explain something too, because I do like to take the opportunity to teach when I can. And I had misunderstood this and misbelieved this. I had probably been mistaught this and didn't think enough to study on it. Okay. Now I'm to the point that I question everything I've ever heard in my life, and so I study everything because I want to know the truth. One time, Melvin Cottle said, how can I know the Word if I don't know the Word? You can't know the Word of God if you don't know what these words mean and what it's saying to you. And so the potter's field was actually a field that potters would go into and take clay for pottery. I'd always thought that it was a place where they discarded old broken pots and everything, and that's what I was taught. It really was. That's what I'd heard, and that's what I just assumed. But a potter's field was where potters would go into and they would take clay for pottery, but they had done this so much because it had already been completely stripped of clay. Potter's field was a useless piece of land. You couldn't farm on it. There was no clay left. But because it had holes and ditches that were left from potters going out and harvesting that clay, it was a great place to bury unknown strangers' bodies. And so when people would come through Jerusalem, when people would come through Judah, they would bury them in the potter's field. So if a stranger died, they wouldn't just leave them out for the vultures. They would bury them in the potter's field. Wherefore that field was called the field of blood unto this day. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by the prophet, by Jeremy the prophet. I love some of these translations. Yeah, Jeremy the prophet. It's Yeremahu, which is Jeremiah, and which was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them for the potter's field as Yahweh appointed. And that's literally what it states in Jeremiah, is that they would take 30 pieces of silver, the price for which he was valued by the children of Israel that valued him, and they gave it for the potter's field as Yahweh appointed. And Yeshua stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? And Yeshua said unto him, You say that, or thou sayest. And when he was accused of the chief priests and the elders, so they stood there and they threw the accusations out so that Pilate could hear why he had brought them. And when he was accused of the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. Then said Pilate to him, do you not hear how many things they witness against you? And he answered him to never a word, insomuch that the governor marveled greatly. Now at that feast, you've got a guy here. I'm going to stop. I don't want to go into now at that feast. But you've got a guy here who quite literally is being accused of all these things. And he is making no defense for himself whatsoever. He's not saying, have mercy. He's not saying, that's not true. I didn't do that. And so that's why it says the governor marveled at him greatly. I mean, like, what was he supposed to think? I mean, he'd never had somebody come before him and just stand there and take it, you know. And, I mean, even those that were guilty were, you know, even today, I mean, every prison that I know of is full of people that didn't do it. You know, they're innocent. And so, insomuch that the governor marveled greatly. Now, at that feast, the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner whom they would. This, of course, is the Passover. And they had a tradition that the Roman governor for Passover would release one Jewish prisoner. And they had a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Now, I'm going to do this, and I don't want people to... I do a lot of this. What was that name actually? You saw just a minute ago why I do that is because we hear these names that we've always read. They don't mean anything to us when you don't understand the Hebrew language. Jesus was not Jesus' name. I don't mind to use Jesus. We say Jesus. We use it interchangeably. I'm not saying anything like that, and I'm not saying, I always like how Charity always says that, you know, he's bilingual, you know, and probably omnilingual. I'm pretty sure no matter what you say in any language, he knows, you know. But, so I'm not saying that you can't say Jesus, but there is no meaning in the name Jesus. His name is Yeshua. And when you look at Yeshua, the meaning of Yeshua or Yehoshua, if you look at the meaning of that, it means Yahweh is salvation. There's meaning in that name. There's no meaning in the name Jesus because there was no name Jesus in all of Hebrew. It didn't exist. So it's important to me that we look at names and we see what they mean because names carry weight. And names, because of that, can have more meaning when you look at it. Barabbas. Okay? Again, no name in Hebrew ended in S. So what does that make his name? Barabbah. You know what B-A-R, anytime you see B-A-R, like Bar-Jonas, Simon Bar-Jonas, means Simon, the son of Jonah. Bar means the son of. So what does this become? The son of Abba. What does Abba mean? Abba is Hebrew for father. It's actually a term of endearment for father. It means daddy. It doesn't mean a Swedish rock band from the 80s. Abba is a term of endearment for daddy, or for father. And so it literally, like when you're reading in Romans and it says, we've not received the spirit of adoption again to fear, but we've not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but the spirit of adoption whereby we cry, Abba, Father. We have the opportunity to call out to him with an endearment that can only be held by your child. That can only your child can call you daddy, you know, in that way. And so if we look here, we see Barabbas. Now there's another thing that it could mean. It could mean Bar Rabbah or Rabbi, which means either his name was the son of a teacher, or, which would be Rabbi, or the son of the father. Two ways I want you to look at this. Number one, they were offered the son of the father, or what did Yeshua over and over and over refer to himself as? The Son of Man. And they chose. What are we? We're the creation of God. We are the sons and daughters of the Father. They chose creation more than they chose the Son of Man. Because here's the thing, here's what happened. They had this notable prisoner called Barabbas. And therefore they were all gathered together, and Pilate said to them, "Whom will ye that I release to you, Barabbas or Yeshua, which is called the Messiah?" Christ means Messiah. They knew exactly what he was saying. They were saying, do you want us to release to you the Son of the Father or the Son of the Teacher? Or do you want us to release to you Yahweh is salvation, who is the Messiah? That's the power held in those two names. For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. He knew that it was because of the power that he held among the people. And so he was calling them out right there. Do you want me to release this criminal, or do you want me to release the one that you've been waiting for, your Messiah? That's all I've heard since I came here to Jerusalem, is all this about a Messiah. This guy shows up working miracles. He claims to be your Messiah. People call him the Messiah. Are you wanting your Messiah, or are you wanting this criminal? When he was sat down at the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, "Don't have anything to do with that just man, because I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him." Do you know how it is when you have like a really bad dream and you spend the whole next day just in impending doom? Like you feel like something's not right, even though it was just a dream. The Lord spoke to her and she had a dream about him. She literally went to her husband and said, "Please don't have anything to do with this." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Yeshua. Now I want you to think about this for just 1 second. Who did it just say talked to the people and swayed them to start crying out for Barabbas? The chief priests and the elders. He could have been the Son of the Father. What was the other thing that his name could mean? The Son of the Teacher. The son of possibly one of the Pharisees or one of the Hebrew leaders, one of the Jewish leaders. And so, how easy would it be that there would be that corruption, that there would be that where those people grouped together and said, "Okay, we're going to take care of your son and get rid of him at the same time. We're going to make this work out. We have to go talk to all the people." And so they went, they swayed the people. And so the governor asked again and said to them, "Which of the two will you that I release to you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said unto them, "What shall I do then with Yeshua, which is called your Messiah?" They all said to him, "Let him be crucified." And the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, when he saw that no matter what he said, that's all they were going to do, but rather that a tumult was made, he didn't want a riot to break out. He called for water. He washed his hands before the multitude and said, "I am innocent of the blood of this person. See ye to it." Then answered all the people and said, "His blood be on us and on our children." That was symbolic. They would do that a lot when it was a very public thing that they would have a dish of water. They would wash their hands publicly and say, "I have nothing, I'm not touching this. My hands are clean regarding this." And when he said that, they cried out and said, "That's fine. Let his blood be on us." The people cried that out. The people were so swayed. They were so bent. They were so broken. These are the same people that days before were lying out palm leaves. And they were taking their jackets off and putting them out so that the colt of the donkey that he rode in on would not step on the ground as it came into Jerusalem. And they cried out, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed be the name of the Lord. They came to him and they said, tell these people to stop crying out. He said, I tell you right now, if these people weren't crying out, the rocks would cry out my praise. Why? Because the Spirit of the living God, the embodiment of the living God, Yeshua the Messiah, was entering in to the holy city once again. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and our children. Verse 26, then released he Barabbas unto them. And when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Yeshua into the common hall where all the other soldiers could watch. It's like a bunch of dogs, you know. How it is when you got a pack of dogs. One of them by themselves, a little scared, might even be able to pet them. You get one of those dogs bite you, and all of a sudden every one of those dogs start thinking, yeah, we got this, we got this, we got this. And so you got all these guys that are just like a pack of dogs. And they gathered him together in the common hall. And they got the whole band of soldiers. They stripped him down. This is after he was whipped, after he was beaten, and they put on him a scarlet robe. Now, if you read this in the book of John, John describes it as a purple robe. And it's because Roman soldiers always wore red. They had like a red cloak or a red cape that would fasten here and here, or would have a chain or a rope or something that would bind around here. But they always wore red. And imagine if you had, the quality of dye on, say, probably a wool cloak. The quality of dye that you would have had around 30 BC or 30 AD. And it had been laying out in the sun for a long time. And it would fade. It would turn kind of a purplish color. That's why they put the scarlet robe on him. They put that on him because a king, purple dye was expensive, and only royalty, kings, and very wealthy people could wear purple. And so they put it on him. And when they had plaited a crown of thorns, the thorns over in that, around here we don't have a lot of thorns. We got a lot of briars, and briars ain't fun. You don't want to get into a briar patch, but they're not the thorns. We're talking thorns, 2.5, 3 inches long, and very, very sharp and very strong. And so they plaited a crown of thorns, and they put it on his head, and they put a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they took the reed, and they beat him on the head. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off of him. Could you imagine being whipped, being scourged, your back shredded, and then somebody throws an old rough wool robe over your back? Then they jerk it back off of you, and they put your clothes back on you, and then they led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and they compelled him to bear his cross. And when they were come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull, it's the same place that we call Calvary, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall. And when he had tasted thereof, he wouldn't drink. And they crucified him. And they parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. Sitting down, they watched him there. And they set up over his head the accusation written, This is Yeshua, the King of the Jews. Then were there two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left. They that passed by reviled him, or reviled him, wagging their heads and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Because he stood when he was in Jerusalem and he said, Destroy this temple and I will build it up again in 3 days. If you be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priest, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he is really the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we'll believe him. He trusted in God. Let God deliver him now. If he will have him, because he said, I am the Son of God. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. 6th hour, first hour was 6 a.m. 3rd hour, which was when they crucified him, would have been about the 9th hour. Would have been about 9 o'clock, I'm sorry. And then at about noon, there was a darkness all over the land until 3 o'clock in the day. And at about 3 o'clock, Yeshua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of them, that when they stood there and they heard that, they said, this man calls for Elias. Again, we're looking at a mistranslation of a name. It's not Elias, it's Elijah. And that doesn't make any sense. I've taught on this before. I never understood. He's saying Eli. Why would that sound like Elijah? Elijah's name in the Old Testament is actually Eliyahu. And so Eli could be a shortened like Dave and David, Eliyahu. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. And the rest said, Let be. Let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Yeshua, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. We talked the last time about the priest tearing his garment, right? How he tore his garment. You go in the Old Testament, there were other times when people had essentially exhausted every other thing and they were completely done with the situation. When this is the end of this, they would tear their garment. And in effect, what happens if I tear this? When I tear this, what is beneath this is no longer hidden from you. I wear these clothes because y'all don't want to see me without them. And that's an acceptable response. Really, that's why we wear our clothes. It's to hide what's underneath from what's outside. We wear these clothes. And when he cried again with a loud voice, he yielded up the ghost, and behold, the veil of the temple. The veil hung in front of the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was behind the veil. And it was to separate us from the Holy of Holies and the mercy seat. So even the priest, on his garment, he had bells and pomegranates woven all the way around. They were sewn into his garment. And they had a rope tied onto him. And as long as they heard the bells ringing, they knew he was okay. But if there was sin inside him, and the bells stopped ringing because he had gone into the presence of the Almighty in the Holy of Holies, then they would pull him out with the rope because they had to. If Brian's back in there and Brian's bells quit ringing, listen, you don't want Dave to... I'm not going in there if Brian got killed. I know me. There's no way I'm going to make it out. Why was the curtain torn? And why was it torn from top to bottom? It didn't get torn by no earthquake. It got torn because the Father said, I have done everything that I can do. I have opened up the mercy seat to you. And now you can walk into my presence and be with me, and I with you. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake. Rocks broke, they rent, they tore in two, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept. Man, that should tell us a lot of something right there. And came out of the graves after his resurrection. And they went into the holy city, and they appeared to many. When the centurion and they that were with him, the centurion was the head of the guard that would have been there, that would have driven the nails into his hands, into his feet. The head of the guard that would have stood there as they hoisted the cross up into the sky and it dropped. The head of the guard that would have stood there as they mocked him and they spat on him. That would have stood there as they cast lots for his garments. The head of the guard that would have gladly watched any one of those other Jews die as well, because none of them wanted to be there. They wanted to be home in Rome. They were stationed here. They weren't friends with these people. And they were happy to do the job that they did. And when the centurion and they that were with him watching Yeshua saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, truly, this was the Son of God. Let me tell you something. If that's not a life-changing moment for that centurion and the people that was with him, I don't know what's going to be. To realize and recognize that you just killed the Son of the Almighty God. And many women were there beholding afar off, which followed Yeshua from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and John, and the mother of Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. When the evening was come, there was a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who was also himself Jesus' disciple. He went to Pilate and he begged for the body of Yeshua. Pilate commanded that the body be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and he laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre, and he departed. First of all, we know he was a wealthy man because it tells us that he was a wealthy man. The other way that we know that he was a wealthy man is because right there in Jerusalem, he already had a tomb that he had purchased and had carved into the stone. And so they had a stone rolled back that was ready to roll in front of that for the day of his burial. It was a big deal to have a tomb like that. Normal people like us that were living in the outskirts of Judea, normal people like us that were living in downtown Jerusalem, were not going to be able to afford a tomb such as this. And it was a new tomb that no one had ever laid in. They had to take him in. They had to put him in the tomb without preparing him fully for his burial. The reason they had to do that is because at nightfall was the beginning of the high Sabbath. And so they had to get him into the tomb before. Joseph of Arimathea went, begged for his body. They took him and they wrapped him. You know what's funny is the ladies wind up coming after this to anoint his body, right? They came to anoint him. You remember what happened just a few days before this? When that woman came and she brought that alabaster box of ointment and she broke it open and she anointed him, and they said, this could have been sold. And he said, she's doing this for my burial. All those others that had walked with him, they came to prepare him for burial. They came to anoint him for burial. But she was the one who anointed him for burial. He laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock, and he rolled a great stone at the door of his sepulchre and departed. Sepulchre is another word for tomb. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. And the next day followed the day of preparation. The chief priests and the Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I'll rise again. I think it's amazing that all of a sudden they're saying what he said and what he meant to say, instead of taking his words and trying to make it say like he was saying he was going to tear down the actual temple and build it again in 3 days. But they come to him and they say, we remember that the deceiver said while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night, steal him away, and say to the people, he is risen from the dead. So the last error would be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, you have a watch. Go your way. Make it as sure as you can. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. I will never understand, as long as I live, why my Messiah does anything for me. But I will definitely never understand why he would have given everything for me. It doesn't make any sense. But I think it's important that we do look at the Word. I think it's important that we look at the Word for what the Word is, and I think it's important that we don't take the word of people who, however well-intentioned they may be, are only repeating to us the same rhetoric that someone else has repeated to them, and someone else has repeated to them, and someone else has repeated to them. I beg you, don't ever take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. Study it out for yourself. If you see something that I said wrong, by all means, question me. Question me in person. I want you guys to do that. And for anybody that that doesn't come in person or doesn't watch in person, that doesn't come around me or talk to me in person, send me a message. Call me on the phone. I don't care. Call me out on it if I'm ever wrong. Please let me know. All I'm trying to do is seek His face through His Word for the truth of what He is. And so I love you guys, and I thank you all. Anything else that you guys can think of? Nothing? Brian, you got anything else? Retard. Do you want to dismiss us? That'd be okay?
Heavenly Father, good God, we just thank you Lord, for this another Sabbath. It's been together, fellowship with brothers and sisters. Most importantly, communion with you, Father. We just thank you for your Spirit. We thank you most of all for your Word, for the Word that was made flesh and blood among us. Father, we just thank you, praise you for all you do for us. It's in the name of Yeshua, HaMashiach, we pray.
Amen. Hallelujah. Love you guys.